Hello and welcome to the Zuper FM Field Service Your Way with your host, Michael Israel. Michael, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing great today. It's sunny and beautiful in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
It's springtime and we're so excited,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay. So, what have we got going on today?
Well, we have a great guest, Omer Menashe, who is one of the founders of a company called Clyr. And I'm going to ask Omer to introduce himself and his company in just a moment. But we're very excited to have Omer as a guest and also to be a partner now with Clyr.
Thank you guys. Nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me. So my name is Omer, originally from Israel, have lived in New York for the past 4 years or so, and I'm one of the founders of Clyr. That's a Clyr, not like the airport Clear, very different. And what we do is we essentially solve the very big pain of field service companies in the world of expense and spend management. So any receipt, any expense that happens, as many do throughout the day, used to be a very manual process of tracking, assigning to jobs, getting into the office, making sure it's in the books. All of that is now automated using AI and our very robust engine. So that's what
Yeah,
we do.
very, very interesting. And as I mentioned earlier, Clyr is now a partner of Zuper. Clyr is fully integrated with the Zuper Field Service Management application, so that whenever field engineers need to record expenses, all of those expenses are tracked not only through Zuper but also through Clyr, and the processing is pretty automatic. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. So, Omer, how you said you're from Israel? How long have you been in the States?
It's been 4 years now.
Oh, wow. Right, great for you. Did you settle directly in New York?
I did. From Israel to New York in March of 2020 with a 5-month-old baby. That was,
Aha.
I wouldn't recommend it, but that's how it happened.
Well, now your baby is 4 years older, and I understand from a previous conversation that we had that you're moving to what I consider to be God's country pretty soon. Is that right?
Yes, yes, we're very excited. We're moving to Boulder this coming July.
Yeah, that'll be really, really fun for you. I hope that either you are a skier or you will become a skier.
I am a skier, which makes it all the more exciting.
Yeah, good for you. Good for you. I've skied for many, many years and did so in Colorado for a long, long time. So let's move on to the business at hand. You said that you are one of the founders. Give us a little bit of history. What was the impetus behind founding Clyr, and how did you get that idea, and how did you get it going and get it started?
So Clear actually came out of the market essentially screaming at us that that's what they need and not what we had previously built. So I'll take a couple steps back.
Sure.
Uh, I'm a tech guy. Those of you who watch us on video can see I don't look like a field service person. That's because I don't. I'm very bad with my hands. Don't ask me to do anything more than change a light bulb, and I'll probably mess that up as well to an extent. But as a tech guy, a startup person, entrepreneur, which I've been all my life, I've always built companies, had startups. Stripe, the payment company, invited myself and my co-founder to be part of something called Stripe Treasury. And so Stripe Treasury essentially enables companies like mine to use the banking rails to offer checking accounts and cards to companies. And the deal was that Stripe subsidizes the banking side if we build a product. And so the product that we decided to build was a financial operating system for SMBs. Very generic, nothing special, to be honest. And so we built that. The idea was that we'll build their payment processing and their invoicing and their CRM and the analytics, also some part of expense management, as well as also issue their cards and bank accounts. So it would be an entire ecosystem for them to use.
Well, if you'll allow me to interject, you said it's very simple, but that sounds pretty complicated to me. It sounds like a pretty robust, broad system that you were tasked to build.
Yes, well, we weren't even tasked to build it. We took it upon ourselves. So that was
Okay.
the magnitude of the mistake. But what I meant was not that it was simple to build, but rather that it was very generic, very
Okay.
simplistic to assume that we could build something that would fit 50 million US businesses. Anything from brick and mortar to personal trainers, to nutritionists, to field services as well as part of that group. But we did build it. We had a few thousand users. We had a few $1 million pass through the pipes. But we very quickly realized that it was not a sustainable business. It's incredibly difficult to be a bank. It's incredibly difficult to be a payment processor. And it's also very difficult to build everything in between.
Sure.
And so we looked at the data. And we essentially went from two tech guys building a solution for a problem nobody had to trying to understand what problem did people do have, which people were they that were having that problem, and how do we solve that one specifically. And so what we've identified is that, surprise, surprise, personal trainers and HVAC folks are not the same person. And whereas, and I think I told you this, a personal trainer can decide that they're a bartender a week later, and that completely kills our business model.
Or even that night, right?
Or even that night, exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas somebody in the trades probably went to school for that, made sure that they're a master of their craft. They look at it as a career because it is a career for them. And so those were our by far most stable, most engaged users. And they also didn't really need yet another way to process payments or invoice, nor did they need a new bank account or a card. What they did need is a way to track their expenses. And when we identified that kind of gold nugget, we went ahead and had over 100 conversations with companies in that exact target audience definition.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said earlier, instead of us building something and hoping that we understand someone else's pain, we actually listened to them. And we asked them, how do you do things today? What would you want different? And we went and we built that product. And that's what Clyr is today.
So you actually worked with your customers to define the business flow today. And moreover, and perhaps most importantly, you worked with them to understand what is the business flow they need tomorrow.
Exactly.
And then you went about building the application. So can you give us some examples of how Clyr is used in some industries? You mentioned HVAC, so if you want to talk about that's fine with me. Or if you have other examples, that would be great too.
Yeah, of course. So in the world of HVAC, we have one company that is one of our early users. They still are, of course. And their big pain point was that their team kept buying supplies, items, gas, even food when going back and forth from jobs with corporate cards. Now, obviously, that's not a problem. That's what they should be doing. The issue is that then once that expense had happened, somebody had to tell the powers that be, the person at the office, the company owner, why that money was spent, for what purpose, who approved it, and what job it belonged to. And so the guys were about, I think, about 10 teams. They are super, professional at their craft. They know how to fix all. I can't even. You can see how that's not something that I'm super savvy in. But they fixed all the heating and cooling essentially.
Yeah.
They're very good at that. But they were not super organized when it came to paperwork. Right? It's typically two very different types of people. And so they would grab those receipts that they got. They would shove them in the glove compartment, and they would forget about it. And then weeks later, when somebody looked at the data or tried reconciling or tried, doing the books to some extent, and they realized they're missing a stack of receipts times 10 because there are 10 teams, they would reach out to people and say, hey, Bob, where's that receipt from 4 weeks ago?
Right.
And Bob would have no idea because he doesn't know. And even if he did have that receipt in his glove compartment still, he definitely wouldn't know which job it was that he charged it to, all those weeks ago. And so the way that we have Clyr set up completely solves that issue because Bob can report the expense immediately. We text them in real time to say, hey, Bob, you just charged the card for $100. Tell us what it's for. Bob does that, forgets about the paper receipt, doesn't need to save it anymore. And that information flows directly to the office and then beyond. And by doing that, we have upped their receipt intake by over 80%. Not only that, we saved hundreds of man hours of people searching for things, asking other people for things, and even just the general atmosphere in the office where people just stop being angry at each other for missing things. All of these things were solved completely by Clyr. So that's one of the stories we love to tell. And obviously, they're a very happy user of ours.
Yeah, and you mentioned you've saved hundreds of man hours, and I think you've also saved included in that hundreds of hours, man hours, is the amount of time that the technicians, in your example, needed to take to actually record the expense, whether it's recording it on a device or recording it on a piece of paper and submitting it. Because as soon as that person uses that corporate credit card, that expense is recorded in Clyr and now in Zuper, of course, as well. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. Uh, so there is no recording. I mean, the technician doesn't have to pull out his iPhone or his iPad or a piece of paper or a clipboard or anything to write down or enter the expense. It's automatically recorded. Is that correct?
Yep, that is correct. The tech
So,
would have to say which job it's for, but the expense itself is automatically recorded, and it's recorded to that tech. So even if they don't do that, even if they forget still to engage with that text message, we can then remind them on an ongoing basis, hey, Bob, you owe us 3 receipts and 4 codings from 5 days ago. Here's the list. Bam, bam, bam. Go through it. Takes you 3 seconds, and you're done.
yeah, that's great. I can think back to the days when I was a field service manager and had technicians reporting to me. And back then, it was still paper, right? So they would mail in their expense reports, and I would have the unenviable task of going through dozens of expense reports every week with maybe hundreds of receipts, and then having to call up a technician or two and saying, hey, you're missing this receipt for your hotel bill for one night. Can you submit the receipt? So the amount of time that is saved, and of course, there's been a lot of time saved since then because things are more automated with mobile devices, et cetera. But still, the amount of time that's saved by just automating the process of recording the expense, associating that expense with the technician that has incurred the expense, associating that expense with the particular work order or job that the technician is working on, that's got to be an enormous amount of time, especially if you consider that many companies have not only tens of technicians, but perhaps hundreds of technicians. So if you think about it in the aggregate, then that's got to be an enormous potential savings in terms of amount of time. And I want you to address this as well, and maybe you have some anecdotes that you can share. It's also got to be very valuable in terms of the accuracy of the expense recording.
100%. It definitely is. And the reason why the accuracy is so important,
Yeah,
as you know, is the fact that if it's not accurate, you're actually losing out on real income. And what I mean is the fact that a lot of these jobs need to be billed back to clients.
correct.
And if you don't know what you've spent for a job, you cannot bill the client for it. And if you find out, 4, 5, 3 weeks later, however long, that, oh yeah, those $500, those $1,000, those $1,500 of that part or that order from our warehouse should actually have been billed to job 123, and that invoice already went out to the client. They already paid. They close it out. You cannot re-invoice that client for the difference. So that's $1,500 that go right out of your pocket. And
Yeah.
another story we like to tell is how we identified over $70,000 for one of our users that had exactly that problem. So over a year, they lost out on $70,000, no small amount, just because, because of life, because the techs are not great at being accurate in a timely manner. And even if they are down the line, it's the loss has been booked.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I suppose that you could invoice a customer for a receipt that was missing on the previous invoice, but I guess good luck collecting that, right? You might have some customers that are good-hearted and would say, "Yeah, we understand your mistake," and pay it, but that's not going to happen every time. So it's better to be accurate the first time and thorough the first time.
100%. And I mean, do you really want to be that business that
Yeah.
invoices clients twice for a
Oops.
job? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
my bad.
Oh, oops. Yeah. And the customer is thinking, how do they stay in business if they're that sloppy? So yeah, that's great. So how do the technicians then get the receipts? And maybe we can talk about the Zuper integration here too. How do the technicians get the receipts back to Clyr? Do they take a picture with their iPhone? What's the process that you've observed?
So yeah, we have 4 different ways of submitting receipts to Clyr. One of them, and that's what the field techs use, obviously, is their phone. So they snap a photo, they text it into Clyr. No mobile app. We used to have a mobile app. The techs hated it. They don't like. They don't need more apps, but they do know all. They all know how to text, and so they text it. We process it. We parse it using our OCR and our AI technologies to understand what the data points are, what the amount is, what the merchant is, etc. And
Mhm.
then we match it with the correct transaction, and we copy over all the coding that the employee submitted for that transaction onto the transaction on the Clyr side as well. So
Mhm.
essentially, once that happens, we match what the online statement says with all the business data in one. So that
Okay.
happens in real time. That's way number one. The
Okay.
other ways are an email address where for office staff, they can forward emails with receipts to us. We will do the same process, but through email. You can also drag and drop receipts from your desktop into the Clyr browser screen just to make it super easy. And the last way is a Chrome extension, where if you really want to do power coding on your browser, you can install the extension, just drag rectangles around the screen and identify receipts that way. So we have 4 ways. Anyone's preferred flavor of receipt capture is supported by Clyr.
Okay. Let's move on and talk about the Zuper integration. First of all, we've announced recently that we have a complete integration now with between Zuper and Clyr for expense reporting on work orders. How did you discover Zuper, and how did the partnership come about from your perspective?
So while Clyr is great at capturing data and managing expense and accounts payable automation, we didn't really touch on that, but we have a full
Hmm.
module that does that as well. What's missing or what could be better is the seamlessness of managing your business. So it's nice that the data is siloed and at least you have access to it on Clyr. But if we are not part of your daily CRM work management platform, then there's something to be desired still.
Right.
And so that's when we identified Zuper essentially as that platform that is always open in the office, on the screen. That's how we dispatch. That's how we manage the jobs. And this is essentially the platform that the company uses 24/7 almost. And so, what we are trying to create and what we have created with this integration is a full 2-way data information exchange between Clyr and Zuper. And that means that as the user integrates their Zuper instance to Clyr, we will pull in all of their team members, all of the jobs, anything that's open, anything that's closed, which jobs are assigned to which techs.
Hmm.
This way we can organize it in Clyr. And for example, when a tech texts that receipt, as I had mentioned earlier, we
Hmm.
will only show that tech the jobs that they have open for them on Zuper, not everybody's jobs. So it's
Right.
super easy.
Hmm.
And on the flip side, once that transaction is coded to the job, we will push it back into Zuper so they can see the expense on their Zuper job page. And this way, we really extend the capabilities of both platforms, all for the benefit of the end user who uses both platforms at the end of the day.
Right. So that's really important and very good to hear. Just in case people are not terribly familiar with what Zuper is and who we are, let me just say very briefly that we are a full-fledged, very robust field service management system, which allows us, among other things, to keep track of all of the work that a field service technician or a field service engineer does in the field in the course of doing their normal job, whether it's an installation or a repair or an upgrade or a deinstallation, any kind of maintenance work that they are doing on products that they service. So we keep track of all the time that they invest. We keep track of all the parts and material that they use. We keep track of all the travel expenses that they have and the travel time, et cetera. And in the course of doing their work, many technicians incur some expenses. I mentioned travel expenses, for example, maybe gasoline, maybe a hotel bill, maybe a flight. Maybe they have to run over to Home Depot or Lowe's or Ace Hardware or somewhere and buy some parts or some material. So they incur expenses in the course of doing their job, not just the time that they're devoted to the job, but the actual expenses that they incur as well. And that's where the integration with Clyr comes in. So it's a really important step for us um, to have, for us, Zuper, that is, to have that ability to integrate full fledged expense management within the Zuper system because expenses are an important and frequent aspect of delivering service to a customer. And then, as Omer mentioned, it's, I think, very important for them to have a more complete view of the customer rather than just having information about what expenses are incurred. Now they're also seeing what are the activities that were involved in incurring those expenses from a service perspective. Did I explain that reasonably correctly from your point of view, Omer?
You explained it wonderfully, Michael. Thank
Oh,
you.
can I have a job?
Done. Let's talk about it after this.
Okay. Just kidding, of course. Um, so uh, let's talk a little bit more about how you engaged with Zuper and we came to the point where we've actually now got a partnership. What were the next steps? Once you discovered Zuper, what happened next?
So we've identified Zuper as a leading field service management platform.
Thank you.
And at that point, it made perfect sense for us to want to integrate for the reasons we both spoke about. So we reached out to Zuper, and I have to say that the experience of building the integration was just a pleasure. It was so seamless. Clearly, the team at Zuper is used to building integrations. Everything, there was a playbook, let's do this, this, and this. I think this is one of the quickest and fastest integrations we were able to put together. And this is one of our more robust integrations. Not every platform has the ability to receive data. So,
Yep.
like I said, Clyr also pushes data into Zuper for
true
maximum efficiency.
True two-way integration, right?
Yeah,
Bidirectional. Yep.
not every FSM can do that. And so that really speaks volumes to Zuper's development team, etc. And yeah, I mean, I think within weeks of agreeing to do this, we had it ready for testing, and then a couple more weeks just to iron out how we announce and all. And as of a couple weeks ago, we are officially in the marketplace.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad you mentioned, and thank you, by the way, for mentioning how easy the integration was. And you're right. I think Zuper has a good deal of experience in developing integrations such as this. We have, as a matter of fact, more than 60 integrations with other complementary software packages, including financial packages, ERP packages, et cetera. So that's I'm very grateful, as I said, that you mentioned that. It's important for our audience to know that if they are considering Zuper, that the ability to integrate with other applications is something that we have a great deal of experience with. So once again, thank you for that. So I know this is a new, we just rolled it out not too long ago. It's one of the reasons we're having this podcast is to let people know that it exists. Do we have any joint customers yet? Any prospects that we're working on together? And if we can't say names, that's fine. Just explain, if so, what maybe the businesses are.
Yeah, so we have a few prospects who have reached out already just by visiting the marketplace on occasion, seeing what's new, seeing Clyr, and reaching out, which has been great to see. It really speaks to the need and the quality of the Zuper customer base. They need something like this. I think the ones that come to mind, there's one that does remodeling. There's another one that does heating and cooling. Actually, I think we have a rather large landscaping company. And I know there's four. The fourth escapes me.
That's all right.
Yeah, but we're all very excited to see the traction almost right off the bat with the Zuper clients, and I think they're happy. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, those are good anecdotes as well, and I'm sure as time goes on, we'll have many, many more. What before you found Zuper as Clyr, what were the major industries that you've had some success in? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so we really tried building Clyr to best support companies that have an out-of-office workforce, so that they have not been well served by any of the existing solutions for many different reasons. And something like Clyr just wasn't in existence. So anyone whose team is always out and about, just by virtue of providing the service outside, what we call field service, home service, etc., those were and are our best users. Now, sometimes
Right.
we do get your one-off occasional event production team because they look at it as a per job basis. Every event is a job. But that's really on the small minority of user base. The vast majority of the user base is field services, and then we also have a growing cohort of property management companies that have also started finding Clyr as a solution to tracking expenses to owners, properties, and tenants.
Yeah. That's good. It sounds like we're very well aligned because Zuper serves communities and companies that constantly have people out in the field, and that runs the gamut. I mean, the number of industries that um, are targets or are potential users of your platform and the Zuper platform is incredibly broad. It runs all the way from landscaping and pool maintenance all the way up to people that are installing and maintaining surgical robot arms in operating rooms in hospitals and everything in between. I always like to tell people it's very interesting. People will ask me, what do I do for a living? And I say, well, I work for a software company. And they say, well, what kind of software? And I say, well, I work for a company that produces field service management software. And almost inevitably, they say, what is field service? Uh, and then I explain to them what I just said to you. And finally, I'll say, when you see a van of any kind driving down the road, that's probably a field service person going out in the field to do something. So your solution and our solution are perfectly aligned to provide a much more thorough um, processing capability to the end users of both systems in terms of managing their expenses. And one other thing I'd like to say in closing, we're coming up to the end here, is that I've been a field service analyst in the past as well. And in the capacity of being an analyst, I've done, my partner and I have done surveys of actual field service technicians. And one of the things we always ask in the annual survey that we did was, what do you like best about your job? And what do you like least about your job? The number one answer always, always for what do you like best about your job is, I like fixing things. The number one answer 100% of the time about what do you like least about your job is, I hate paperwork. That's consistent year after year in the research that I am familiar with. Your application is a perfect answer to helping those people that hate paperwork eliminate as much paperwork and redundant data entry as possible. So I guess my congratulations to you and your founding team for producing this pretty amazing application, I think. Um, and let me ask you a couple things. Do you have any parting thoughts, parting recommendations that you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, I always like to say that you don't have to use Clyr, but if you decide to start thinking, just to align what you said, because obviously we're hearing the same thing about paperwork. So you don't have to use Clyr, but today it's 2024. There's so many ways to leverage technology and AI and all those smart things to alleviate the pain, at least some of the pain of all that paperwork and manual data entry. Again, obviously I'm biased, I'm partial to Clyr, and I would love for everybody to use Clyr. But if for some reason you need an in-between until you decide to use Clyr, look into it. We still meet way too many people who still work with a pen and paper, who still do things in Excel. There's
Yep.
no reason to do that. And if you reach out to me, I'm more than happy to point you in the right direction, even if it's not Clyr, but it is Clyr.
Yeah, we see the same thing all the time too. People still using paper and spreadsheets, et cetera, to manage and schedule technicians. Lastly, please tell the audience how they can get a hold of you and learn a little bit more about Clyr if they're so inclined.
With pleasure. So our website is clyr.io, clyr.io.
Cool.
You can find us on LinkedIn. You can find us on Facebook, on Instagram. You can reach out to me personally with any questions. My name is Omer, O-M-E-R, at clyr, clyr.io. And I'd love to hear from any of the listeners.
Well,
love
great.
meeting and having conversations about field services.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure talking to you and I personally, and I know all of our team are very, very excited about this new partnership and integration with the Clyr solution. So thank you and thank your team. And finally, let people know how to get a hold of me if they want. My name is Michael Israel. You can Google Michael Israel, and you'll probably find a very famous painting named Michael Israel That is not me. So just keep going through the pages if you want to find me. You can also reach me via email at Zuper. It's very easy. It's michael@zuper.co. That's .co.com. Wendy, thank you very much for helping us with this podcast, and I turn it back over to you to close us out.
Well, and I thank you. Thank you to both of you. And thank you for listening today. Please like, follow, and share this podcast with your friends. Until next time, I'm Wendy McConnell.